Welcome to News Inside. I'm Anjang Hyun. Let's welcome back our panelists. Professor Shin Sang-hyuk is with us again. And Dr. Bong Young-sik is back. Thank you for coming back. Let's start by taking a look at our first topic of discussion.
For the first time in 47 years, lawmakers at Korea's National Assembly brought back to life a filibuster. Following Speaker Chung Yi-hwa's introduction of a controversial counter-terrorism bill, opposition parties unleashed this delay tactic to block an immediate vote. The record-breaking filibuster lasted for over a week, putting public attention on the National Assembly. The filibuster also drew the eyes of foreign media, which put the spotlight on the marathon performance that surpassed a 58-hour record previously set by Canada's New Democratic Party in 2011. Opposition lawmakers had vowed to extend the filibuster past March 10th, the end of the current parliamentary session, but brought it to an end on Wednesday. Regardless of this delay tactic, an extraordinary session at the National Assembly after the main parliamentary session is over would allow for a vote on the anti-terrorism bill. Some have pointed out the filibuster is also ground to a halt other issues of urgency, such as redrawing the country's electoral map and rolling out punitive measures against North Korea. Public opinion on the filibuster remained deeply divided. According to a recent survey, over 45% said they're against the filibuster since the anti-terrorism bill should swiftly be passed. On the other hand, over 44% said they're for the move as it's considered a legal tactic. With reviews split on the recent filibuster, what place will this hold in Korea's parliamentary history, and how will lawmakers move forward from here on out?
Over the past week, the word filibuster was one of the most searched keywords on major internet portals in Korea. The main opposition party had employed this delay tactic to block a vote on a proposed anti-terrorism bill. Let's discuss the controversy surrounding this parliamentary procedure. So this marathon filibuster set a new world record, drawing attention not only from the general public, but from foreign press as well. What did you think about it?
Well, personally, I doubt whether it was really, filibuster was needed for the opposition party. Well, as far as I know, it will not change the situations at all in an effort to deal with the anti-terrorism bill. So I dare to say they had the political considerations for the win at the general election in the coming April. So I think that personally it was not necessary for the political party, considering the state affairs we have to consider to maximize national interests.
Dr. Bong, what did you think?
Well, I first would like to highlight that the Speaker of the House made a first step in a wrong direction. The same House Speaker refused to use his prerogative to take the emergency measure to put the bill on the vote, when Blue House specifically requested him to take the measure with regard to the passage of the labor reform bill. But this time he used his prerogative to put this bill on the floor for voting. So the opposition party members used the filibuster as the remaining effective tactic to delay the voting process. So what was not really clear in this case compared to the previous case in which he refused to take the prerogative is how much emergency was really involved in his decision, change of mind. Because it is true that the motivation was driven by North Korea's two provocation, one by the fourth nuclear test and the other one by missile launch. But there should be a very verifiable and clear correlation between the political need to pass this law, the counter-terrorism bill, which is focused on dealing with North Korean threat, not just a blanket measure dealing with any kind of terrorism. And the justification whether the current legal measures do not suffice to cope with the expected threats and provocations that threaten the well-being and safety of citizens in South Korea. We do not see the justification explained by either side of the floor nor by the administrative body of the government. So citizens are not properly informed about the necessity of taking the House of Speakers' prerogative on one hand, and the opposition party's decision to take this filibustering as a countermeasure. So if you're talking about government's accountability for the well-being and the safety of citizens, during the time the opposition party delayed the voting process by filibustering, both parties have to come together head to head to deliberate what kind of content should be revised and remained in the bill that should be acceptable in the eyes of general citizens. But they just wasted time.
Well, filibuster is a legal measure guaranteed by the National Assembly law, though, right? Can you tell us how it came to be and what kind of history it has in Korea?
It's a legal measure under parliamentary law. And the late President Kim Dae-jung was the first one who take advantage of this legal measure in the parliamentary history. As a freshman National Assembly member, he used a filibuster to stop arresting his colleague member, Kim Junyeon, from being arrested, which lasted more than 5 hours. That was the first record. The filibustering was deemed illegal in 1973, but it was revived as a legal measure in 2012, introduced by the passage of the so-called parliamentary advancement, 국제 선진화법. And it is ironical that at the time, the leader of the opposition party who supported the passage of this parliamentary advancement bill was none other than the current president Park Geun-hye. So it's kind of boomerang effect for this administration.
Right. Well, obviously, each country has a different political culture, but how would you compare Korea's filibuster to those in other countries, like the U.S., for example?
In Korea, to have a filibustering at the Congress, it requires about more than 1/3 the members' consent. Otherwise, anyone can use the filibustering at the Congress. And once they left the podium, they cannot take the podium again. This is another rule regarding the filibustering in Korea. How about USA? Anyone, if they want, they can use the filibustering at the Senate, but there are one way to prevent him or her from using the filibustering at the Senate. More than 60%. I mean, as you know very well, the number of the Senate in the U.S. is 100. So out of 160% said no, if they do not allow anyone to use the filibustering, no one can use filibustering at the Senate. So this is a bit different between the Korean system and the USA system.
Now, this filibuster was to block a government-backed counterterrorism bill. What was so controversial about this bill?
Well, once you grant the government more investigative right that may infringe upon citizens' liberty, then there's a great deal of difficulty to take it back, as well illustrated in other countries' cases, including the Patriot Act in response to the 9/11 terrorist attack in the United States. So it's very disconcerting that the government wanted to expand the purview of the National Intelligence Service right to investigate the private citizen's life. And although the justification for this counterterrorism bill was to cope with expected threats and attack by North Korea, the character of this bill was not perfectly clear about North Korean threat as a main focus of the bill. It is more like a very general justification for very expanded exercise of the NIS practice. So there should have been more measures that would have relieved the anxiety of the common citizens about trading their civic liberty in exchange for better protection from outside threat. So the problem, as I see the whole thing, is that the filibustering was not really focused on potentially enhancing the quality of the bill itself. I would ask both sides of the floor, saying that, where's the beef? Where's the beef? It is perfectly okay in any vibrant and mature democracy to take as much time as necessary to perfect the bill. What is regrettable is that enormous amount of time and controversies generated by this filibustering process for the past few days has not resulted in any productive discussions initiated and agreed by both parties.
Although the opposition claims it has succeeded in drawing the attention of the public, the issue itself.
Right, but the leadership of the opposition party should have made it more clear to the ruling party that it is well intended to resume discussion, focus on enhancing the, revising the content of the bill on the floor. But it has been more geared toward demonstration of the individual members' patriotism and their desire to protect the citizens' basic liberty, as opposed to securing enough amount of time to deliberate on the actual content of the bill.
So filibuster was adopted to reflect the voice of the minority, so it has an obvious merit, but as we discussed, there are demerits or downsides as well. Do you think we need this option in our National Assembly?
It's very difficult to yes or no, but I think if I should choose one of them, I think yes. Because that, in the democratic system, we have to respect the minorities' voices, I think, to some degree. And then considering the past history at the parliamentary, we had the very shameful
Violence.
yes. So maybe at least to prevent the violence at the Congress and parliamentary, I think filibuster maybe seems to be needed to some degree. But I think as we discussed so far, to use it effectively, definitely we have to improve the maturity of the politics in Korea. I mean, well, the quality of the politics means that we have to make the politicians to study more and to improve their understanding of a democratic system, and then other knowledges about the capitalism or democracy itself. Themselves. So when we improve the quality of the politics in Korea, definitely filibuster seems to be one of the very good options for the Korean politics, I think.
The draft resolution has been adopted unanimously as Resolution 2270.
This is a clear manifestation of the resolve of the international community to punish North Korea's provocations once and for all.
The international community is stepping up efforts to hold North Korea accountable for its latest nuclear test and rocket launch. The UN Security Council has passed what's been dubbed the strongest set of sanctions against Pyongyang in more than 2 decades. The U.S. is said to have worked very hard to get China on board with the resolution. There's even speculation about possible backdoor deals being made to reach an agreement. What do you think might have been on the agenda if that had been the case?
It is true that the United States and China made a great effort to make this work. And as a trade-off, the United States seems to have agreed to give a serious reconsideration about the deployment of U.S. THAAD to South Korea. Second thought, the United States agreed to show more flexibility as a way of inducing more cooperation from Beijing to put additional pressure on North Korea with this UN Security Council resolution. So it's a good trade-off in terms of demonstrating a concerted resolve between United States and China. It were only demonstrated by the United States, then the quality of resolution at the United Nations Security Council would have been far weaker, and North Korea, as a result, would not feel the pain being held accountable for its missile and nuclear test. But it is very obvious that China wants to get what it think promised by the United States and South Korea for its support for this very strong Security Council resolution in the United Nations. it is not coincidental that Mr. Wu Dawei, the appointment of Chinese government when it comes to North Korea and nuclear issues, is in South Korea for 4 nights and 5 days, which is not common for any diplomat to spend such a big amount of time in one country. And he has served as appointment of all these issues on behalf of China for the past 14 years, 3 years as a Chinese ambassador to South Korea and 11 years as a Chinese representative of the six-party talks. And I think it was only a couple of days ago that he made a visit to all these high-ranked officials, including Mr. Yoon Byung-se, South Korea's foreign minister, and he dubbed the same word, thought. So it is clear that it's like Chinese representative is just waiting until the UN Council resolution will have been passed and collect its due, which is the change in the U.S.-South Korea plan about the potential deployment of THAAD. Until he gets his present promised by the United States, South Korea, in Chinese thinking, he wouldn't go anywhere.
Well, although this new resolution is touted as being the strongest in recent years, some are questioning the efficacy of these new measures put forth by the UN Security Council. What's your assessment?
Well, the UN Security Council and the resolution does not include the more detailed sanctions against the North Korea. Particularly, it did not include 50 or 60,000 North Korean workers, which they are working in the area nearby, border between the North Korea and Russia and between North Korea and China. This is one of the major sources of income for North Korea. It should be included, but it was not touched by the UN the resolution. I think this is one of the weak points. And like our expectations, in fact, the UN resolution does not include the detailed actions requiring the Chinese government to hinder North Korea from developing their nuclear programs. If I add one more thing, in fact, North Korea is heavily relying on the imported oil from mainland China, but there is no any detailed instructions preventing China from providing oils to North Korea. I think these things made us, this resolution is not perfect. It is understood by us as a weaker one than the expressions made by UN officials.
Full of loopholes.
Well, if I may, a different take on those loopholes. I completely agree with what Professor Shin said about this resolution not really meeting the highest expectation of the United States, Japan, and South Korea. But those loopholes will eventually make China extremely vulnerable to international criticism and assessment of its accountability for rendering willfully blind eye to North Korea's provocation in near future. Because all these loopholes make China as the only source of the problem that allow North Korea not changing its provocative behavior and pursuit of nuclear capability. Okay, there's no oil embargo imposed by China on North Korea. That means that China is now responsible for keeping North Korean military alive, and its nuclear and missile program still undergoing. And the UN Security Council resolution is clearly blocking the trade from North Korea in the air and by sea. So North Korea trade is now confined to the continental trade.
Cross-border trade.
Cross-border trade. Cross-border trade is only with China. So everything that is related to North Korea's provocation and the development of WMD capability is directing China. So if there will be another provocation by North Korea, China cannot avoid international criticism. It will be singled out as the only country accountable for allowing North Korea to continue to develop its nuclear weapon capability.
But I think we have to think about why then Chinese government has taken such a kind of stance. Well, as you know very well, in the region, China is very competing with the USA. Well, on the USA side, to strengthen their position, they strengthen the collaboration with the Japan, and they just try to hold the Korean hands, I mean, the cause of the Korean hands. The basic Chinese policy is to control the expansion of the USA influences in the region by having the influences over not only North Korea but also South Korea. So that's the reason. They officially they said that we have to control the North Korean the provocative actions, but they are hesitating to take some very detailed actions against North Korean government. And at the same time, they threat us. Well, I said threat us by using the THAAD, deployment of THAAD on the Korean Peninsula with some gift holding their hands. That is the economic gift. If you want to strengthen the economic ties with us, from the strengthened economic ties, if you want to take a piece of cake from us, larger piece of cake from us, you have to get closer to us. That's kind of some stance taken by the Chinese government. So we have to understand it, and then what can you do? We have to strengthen the collaboration with Japan and USA. I think then Chinese government will change their fundamental approaches to North Korea, I think.
Well, the line of defense usually employed by China against the criticism is that, well, China has been doing its best and more to control North Korea, but it simply doesn't have enough influence upon North Korea. But that kind of line of defense is losing power. The loopholes involved in the UN Security Council resolution this time may be regarded by Chinese as a diplomatic success. But existence of these loopholes will leave Chinese government with less and less excuses that it doesn't have any influence on North Korea. Because compared to other countries, after the passage of this UN Security Council resolution, they will leave North Korean trade only with China, cross-border trade, and it severely restrict the import of oil and other materials and international finance into North Korea. Then China will remain as a singular source of the potential WMD capability that is available to North Korea.
Within 5 days of its release, the film Spirit's Homecoming eclipsed the 1 million mark in ticket sales. The film deals with the issue of wartime sexual slavery under Japanese imperialism, and it's still going strong, beating out major blockbusters. We'll talk about this film in more detail after a quick look at this next video clip.
ただ興奮のためなメスだ。
여기 어디냐고 물었지. 너 그까지 거 걱정하니? 여기가 지옥이다, 야.
연하만 기다리는 부모님 안 보고 싶나?
이제 곧 다 안 끝나겠나? 언니야, 이제 그만 우리 집에 가자.
March 1st was Korea's Independence Movement Day. Don't you think it was a really timely release for the movie?
I think so. I think so. Well, more than 1 million people already saw this movie, and I think my daughter saw this movie and she cried, and then she told me that is it a real story? I said yes. And then definitely the film remind many Koreans the sad history we had in the past. That means certainly it will be a kind of negative factors in the future relations between two countries. As you know very well, very recently, both country governments they finalized they talk about the wartime sexual slavery issues officially, but not all Koreans are satisfied with the deal about this issue, and mainly because of the Japanese government attitude or measures after the deal. And under such a kind of circumstances, this film could set on fire on the anti-Japanese sentiment in Korea.
Well, it certainly has thrown the issue of wartime sexual slavery back in the spotlight, hasn't it?
Right. I'd like to regard this as a very positive development in the long run. because I see more and more Koreans taking ownership of this very tragic and ugly history. We used to just put all the blame on the Japanese as a perpetrator of the misfortune rendered to these innocent victims. But the main mission of any sovereign country is to provide basic protection for its members. So the failure to protect your own daughters and your mothers and grandmothers is a very difficult topic to own for any members of a nation. But the fact that now we are able to produce a movie and separate the narrative of this very painful, heartbreaking story as our own story, not somebody else's story or so shameful story, but part of our story, showing that South Korea has matured as a vibrant democracy and a system that has a high respect for basic human rights.
Well, from planning to premiere, it is said to have taken the movie 14 years, and part of the production costs came from public donations. So, what did people think about the film? Take a look.
많이 찾아와 주셔서 진심으로 감사드립니다.
It was so heartbreaking. I was crying. The story, knowing that it's true, knowing that that's what they, went through, and knowing that this is the story of really one person when there was thousands to go through this, it's shocking.
One of the most powerful movies I've ever seen. It's about time someone addressed this issue straightforward the way that this was done.
ものがあったの。これはもう世界中の人に見てもらいたいですね。この場所に見てていいんだろうなって、そっちの方でね、飛び出したくなりましたね、日本人として。
이 영화를 통해서 위안부 할머니들께서 많은 위로를 받으셨으면 좋겠고
우리 세대들도 이런 아픈 역사를 기억할 수 있는 계기가 됐으면 좋겠다는 생각이 들었습니다.
오래 기억해야 될 그런 시간인 것 같아가지고.
Korea and Japan struck a deal on wartime sexual slavery on December 28th, and that was not without controversy. So the release of the movie at this point could possibly reignite the debate. But some are saying what's done is done. We do have that agreement now in place. So perhaps we should look at the issue not from one that pits Korea against Japan, but of one that is about war and sexual violence against women. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree with that because you have to see this as a movie, narrative of a very tragic story, which has no political implication as original intention behind the manufacturing and releasing of this film in South Korea and Japan. When Charles Darwin was asked, if your theory of evolution is correct, what difference is left between animals and human beings? And Darwin's answer was straight. Humans are only animals who blush, meaning that humans are different from animals for its capability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. So this movie is about allowing ourselves to be in the shoes of these victims. And the national differences in terms of interpreting the historical facts of the wartime sex slavery between South Korea and Japan, I don't think there is a huge gap in interpreting the sadness and tragedy behind this historical fact. So political negotiations, I don't think will be closely tied to the public's reaction to this movie in Korea and Japan.
Well, with the movie doing so well at the box office, the issue is in the spotlight once again. Do you see this affecting future Korea-Japan relations?
Yes, I think so. As I explained before, on the short-term basis, it will reignite the anti-Japanism in Korea. But on the long-term basis, I think we need Japan. Japan needs Korea. I mean, we should have to make every effort to build the relations based on mutual trust. The both government, both people should make every effort. But I think Japan should change first. I mean, why? Because that the victim will never ever forget the tragic history memories, but the hitters or attackers can easily forget what they did. So I think in this very simple, not theory, but the rules in the life, the Japanese government should show their change in dealing with this issue first. Then I think subsequently Korean people will change their attitude or their minds towards this issue, I think.
Yeah, there will be a strong reaction from Korea and Japan to this movie. It's such a powerful story. That's in essence, because it's not a story belong to Koreans alone or belong to Japanese alone, but it's a human history, and the narrative is about gross sexual violation against the women. And that's a universal violation of basic human rights. So the strong reactions and feelings that we attain when we watch movie dealing with the theme of human rights violation and the massacre, such as Schindler's List or the Sophie's Choice. We do not regard the film only confined to the history between Nazi Germany and Jewish people in the past, but we regard the stories as our own stories. So I hope that strong reactions, nonetheless, that strong reaction will trigger more productive collaboration between two civil societies in Korea and Japan.
Well, in this context, I think we should get some lessons from this film. We should not use this film to criticize each other. I think the basic approaches we have to take when looking at this film, definitely we have to take steps on a long-term basis. As I said before, to have the mutual trust, definitely we have to use this film as a kind of some materials to get the lessons from it.
Well, people who have seen Spirit's Homecoming have said the message of the movie resonates strongly with them, especially as it reflects a dark and difficult period in Korea's past. Now, let's switch gears and head on over to the U.S. It was the fiercest week of competition so far in the U.S. primaries. Super Tuesday marked a key turning point for candidates vying to win their party's nomination in the November presidential election. What do we know so far of the candidates' policies toward this region, though, Korea and Northeast Asia?
Well, speaking of the Senator Hillary Clinton, if she's going to be the president candidate for her party, then you can assume some concrete line of policy, U.S. policy toward East Asia. She's the one, as a Secretary of State, who authored the rebalancing strategy, or U.S. pivot to Asia, with Mr. Kurt Campbell. So if she's elected as president, then the U.S. will continue to make increasing investment, militarily and economically, toward China and Northeast Asian countries. But at the same time, that line of foreign policy toward Northeast Asia will create more frictions between United States and China, especially with regard to the China Sea issue. Because as a Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton made it clear that the United States would not condone the stealthy expansion of military presence by China in the South China Sea. So collision with regard to the international regime in South China Sea and the territorial issues will be flared up between US and China if she is elected.
So Hillary Clinton is a proven leader. We can kind of guess why voters are driven toward her. But what's driving voters toward Donald Trump?
Well, I read a very interesting article a few days ago. They said the main supporters for Donald Trump, those are people who do not have interest in the politics before. And they got disappointed from Mr. Obama's performance as a president. So they just put the first priority to the strong America. Well, many of them said that, supporters for Trump said that Mr. Trump is similar to Mr. Ronald Reagan. But I think the totally two people are different, right? But what I'm saying is that people, supporters for Trump at the moment, they do not have in-depth knowledge or understanding about politics. And the another point, actually, those who, the voting rates of those people and participating in the voting actually among them is very low. So what I'm saying is to suppose, the reason why he got support from the people is that, it's a dream or something like that, just the wish, which is not based on reality. The people who has those kind of dream, they just support the Mr. Trump.
And that Mr. Trump also appeals to low-income, less educated or conservative whites who have been quite frustrated, attaining a growing sense of alienation from the mainstream politics. Although they would like to be acknowledged as a keystone member of the United States. They want to have a candidate who will declare that these people are true Americans. These people work hard for the prosperity and glory of the United States. And this is time for them to take the credit for their sacrifice for the country. When the country had a first African-American president and having issues with the increasing number of immigrations and the rather stagnant economy after the 2008-2009 financial crisis. So a very harsh and strong rhetoric actually works for this population. But Donald Trump has not clarified his foreign policy as a president. All he did is just criticizing the foreign policy of the Obama administration. So once he will be exposed to the general public as a Republican Party candidate, then it will be his major weakness because he will be obligated to provide answers and responses in specific terms, as opposed to just swiping away with the jokes or just the criticism toward the Obama administration.
So, what are some remaining variables in the U.S. presidential race now? What should we keep our eye on?
Well, I think regarding a few or the policies, we can find very distinct differences between Mr. Trump and then the Senator Clinton. The first one is immigration policy. Well, in fact, it's like the big issue between the white and the Hispanics. Particularly, I want to point it out the increasing number of the Hispanics among the American population. According to the statistics, as of the end of the year 1990, the Hispanics took only 9% of the total U.S. population. But as of the end of 2015, their ratio increased up to 17.7%. And the most important fact is they are supporting for Democratic Party. So for the Clinton, actually, to maintain the support from the Hispanics in the USA in dealing with the immigration policy, I think it will be very important. And another one is, in fact, the tax policy. There are certainly big differences between Republican Party and then the Democratic Party, particularly between Mr. Trump and Senator Clinton. Well, actually, I think by maintaining, their policy consistency, I think Senator Clinton will be able to maintain the support from the grassroots people. So I think it will be a very important thing. And the last one is the gun control regulations. In fact, this is the one policy shows very big differences between Republican Party and Democratic Party. So I think in terms of the policies, definitely by maintaining distinct differences, I think Senator Clinton will have more advantages rather than Mr. Trump. So I think these will be the remaining the issues we have to consider when we look at the presidential election in the United States.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Professor Shin and Dr. Bong, for sharing your thoughts with us today once again. And that is all for this edition of News Inside. Thanks for watching. We'll be back with more next week.